Good to have you guys here. Okay, family, we're going to dive in. We're going to dive in today. 3D maps. If you know, you know. I love this stuff. This is the juice. So, researching for this presentation, came across a couple really interesting facts to share with you guys. Number one, $86 billion is spent yearly on spine care in the US. I just thought that was a crazy number. I mean, I don't know about you, but 86 billion sounds like a pretty decent amount of money, right? Spine and neck care every single year. And $20 billion is lost in productivity in the US alone from missed work related to spine, back, and neck injuries. 134 billion in total healthcare spending in 2016 for spine conditions. These are just a few cherry picker stats that I found that I thought were pretty mind blowing. And the bottom line of it all is that we need sustainable, simple, and practical tools that we can implement in a preventative fashion to avoid, limit, reduce spine injuries, neck injuries, and low back pain. Because 80% plus, I've seen a statistic that it was upwards of 90 to 95% of all humans will experience some form of low back pain within their lifetime. And out of that, something like 80% is recurring. Those people will experience it again. That's a crazy number. That's absolutely crazy. And one of my favorite quotes is, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." And so we don't need a huge, elaborate, crazy workout program. We don't need to go to yoga every single day to reduce our likelihood of back pain and neck pain, or at least provide some level of alleviation. All we need is something very simple and practical that's sustainable. That's the biggest key. And the reason why I love 3D maps so much. The basic breakdown is this is a mobility program that takes you 5 minutes or less to perform and moves the spine in all the directions that it's designed to move in, which helps to keep it limber and supple and healthy. That's it. That's the basics. So we've got simplicity covered. If it's simple, it's likely more practical to implement. If it's simple and practical, that means that our consistency is going to be a lot higher. Simplicity and consistency equals adherence. That means we're actually going to do it, and anything that we do works. So if it's simple and practical, then we can implement it consistently and create something that's sustainable and effective. This is why I love this so much, because I've worked with so many people. And here's an interesting research study that I heard about. This is over a decade ago at this point, but it was in relation to habit formation and adherence. And I look at myself more as a habit formation coach than I do a performance coach, because I can give you the dopest program ever. And if you don't do it, it's not going to do anything. You're not going to perform any better. And so my goal as a coach is to figure out for each individual how to get them to adhere to the program, how to actually do it and do it consistently over a long period of time so it actually works. That's the whole name of the game for coaching. And the research study I'm referring to was talking about habit formation. They had a control group that implemented one habit. Well, I guess I wouldn't call them a control group. They had 3 different groups. One group implemented one new habit, and they tracked how often they did that habit over the course of, I think it was like 21 or 28 days or something like that, and then looked at the success rate and overall results of how well that habit was implemented and how much progress that person made. Essentially, the group that implemented one new habit had a 95% success rate of adherence. That means out of the 28 days, they did it 95% of the time and got much better results as a result. And the second group implemented two new habits. I can't remember what the habits were, but they were like simple motor tasks, like juggling a tennis ball. It was like some simple stuff like that. Cognitive motor tasks. The group that tried to implement two new habits, they had a 33% success rate or 35% success rate, something like that. Significantly less, right? If you're doing something 1 out of 3 times, one out of every 3 days, so you're basically doing it, you're going from doing it basically every single day to maybe twice a week. How much of a difference do you think you're going to have in your results? If you did this spinal mobility program every day versus twice a week, who do you think is going to win at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of the year? Compounding effect. Crazy when we start adding that up. That's the name of this game, is 1% for 100 days is 100% change. The compounding effect is so fucking real, guys. The third group implemented 3 new habits and they had a 3% success rate, which means they did all 3 habits one of the 30 days, something of that nature. The moral of the story, arbitrary of the numbers themselves, is humans, and there's a great book by Gary Keller called The One Thing. I really loved this book because it resonated with my soul so deeply. I am so great at one-pointed focus. My team can attest to this. When it comes to me lasering in on one thing, I'm like a dog on a bone. If I've only got one bone to chase, get at me. I am hard to beat. I have a drive and a ability to focus one-pointedly, thank you meditation and yoga, at a very high degree. And humans, this book validates the fact that multitasking is actually a myth. Humans do a great job at focusing on one thing, but it's called task switching when we multitask, where you're not actually focusing on 2 things at once. You're focusing on one thing and then you're shifting your focus over to the other thing, and then it's shifting back and forth and back and forth. And we're not very effective at this. We're just not. And in fact, I believe women actually have a much better success rate at task switching than men. Men are better at focusing one-pointedly for longer periods of time on one thing. And the theory behind this is, if you think about women in a social setting and maintaining a home over evolution of humanity, they're doing a lot more things all at the same time. They got to have their awareness on the kid constantly, and a lot of things that they're dealing with. The man is typically working like in the fields, for example, like plowing, doing one task for a long period of time, or hunting, and like has to really dial in the focus and like do this one thing, bring home dinner for everybody, like it's this very important, high value, high risk, high reward task that requires a lot of focus. So not to get too off topic here, but multitasking is a myth, and the more things that we are task switching between, the less efficient that we become at maintaining all of those things and juggling all the balls. And when we try to juggle multiple balls, what happens? We drop them all. And that was basically what that research study showed, is if you focus on one thing consistently every single day, you have a really high likelihood of adhering to it and implementing that as a habit that then becomes consciously competent and eventually unconsciously competent. It becomes automatic. It becomes mastered. And then you don't have to think about it. It just is habituated at that point. Atomic Habits, another great book to look into on this subject. When we go to 2 things, it drops 66%. Like that's so huge. Like, especially if you're looking at like talking about the conversation of performance, like think about your 100-meter dash time at 10 seconds and then 66% decrease. Now you're running a 16, 17 second. You're not even in the competition anymore. You're not even placing. Like it's so significant. It's not even in the same conversation. Money, same thing. You start scaling those numbers up high enough. I mean, we go back to that research study. where it's like, okay, if everybody implemented this 5-minute habit every single day and we had a 95% success rate, could we reduce, I'm not going to say 95%, but when we're talking about $84 billion, 95% success rate on a preventative measure, maybe we put a pretty big dent in that. 33%, not so big, still notable at that high of a number. We're talking billions of dollars saved, but 95% success. I mean, it's like a complete economic shift. It's enormous when we start scaling things up. So in conversations of high performance, it's huge. It's really huge. And so moral of the story is one-pointed focus is very important. Focusing on implementing one habit at a time is very important. And doing so in a way that is simple, that allows for consistent and practical application, which leads to adherence and greater success significantly at scaled numbers of time and volume. It's a no-brainer. Like, we have to keep it simple, and it still has to be effective. And so that's why when I found 3D maps, I was like, oh my gosh, because trying to write someone an elaborate corrective exercise program, think about going to a physical therapist is a good example. Like, it's really expensive. A lot of people can't even afford that, especially if they don't have insurance, like out of pocket. If you came and saw me for a one-on-one session, you're spending a lot of money, and that's not practical for a lot of people. And I'm pretty much going to teach you the same stuff that you can do yourself every day for $0. Low cost, no cost is the answer when we look at a lot of this stuff. And so coming back to 3D maps, what is it? 3D maps is a spinal mobility routine put together by a famous physical therapist, Gary Gray, who I met in 2015 at the Perform Better Summit in Long Beach, California. And Perform Better is a very well-known equipment and coaching organization. They sell a lot of great athletic equipment, and they sponsor a lot of really good coaches and events that come together and share knowledge and build community around fitness and wellness and performance. And there were some amazing coaches and teachers there. I met some really cool people that changed the trajectory of my life at that point in time, for sure. Shout out to Peter Twist. If you haven't read my origin story in the community board, check out the topics section at the top and you'll see the origin story. Shout out to Peter Twist for like really reinforcing JERF and bringing me to full awareness of the corruption in the big food industry, big pharma industry, big farming industry, big politics industry. The whole thing is a revolving door of garbage. And we all know that, right? Like 2020, come on, garbage. If you're still sipping that teat, this is not your community, or you need to do some serious digging and wake up. And so Peter Twist helped me with that in 2015, set me on a trajectory. Brian Grosso kind of started the conversation with me around neuroscience and behavior and adherence and all this habit formation stuff. So it was like this perfect synergy. And then I went to one of Gary Gray's workshops on the 3D maps, and he presented the 3D maps and explained it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is the answer. We can actually get our clients to do the thing that we are always telling them to do. And the reason we can get them to do it is because it's less than 5 minutes a day and it's super simple. It's just 3 moves this way, and this way. And if you do it every day, it makes sense. Like, yeah, okay, that's moving the spine through full range of motion in 3 dimensions, under load, with control. It's like all the stuff that I preach about over and over in any of the programs that you'll do, any of the mobility courses that I have and programs. Like, that is the name of the game, is move your joints and your tissues through full range of motion with control in all directions under load, progressively under more and more load over time as you get stronger and more mobile and build more capacity and resilience. So I was like, wow, this is genius. And the sequence, he explained all that, and I'm like, yep, check, makes sense. Okay, cool. Show us how to do it. We do it. And I'm like, I love this. This is fantastic. The only downside, not even a downside really, but the only consideration I had was this might be, God Macho drilling down my face. This might be a little too progressed for certain populations. Like, I don't know if I would want to take someone with, right out of knee surgery or hip surgery through the 3D maps stepping variation, because it requires a lot of balance and coordination and control. And it's not physically intense, but it definitely requires a level of skill, motor skill, balance, coordination, timing, range of motion, and so on. And so that gear started turning for me. And then as I continued taking more certifications, as I continued, especially I see so many things in yoga asana, which is asana is the movement, the branch of movement in yoga. I see so many things in yoga, archetypal shapes and postures and positions in yoga that have been around for thousands of years that are showing up all over the place in these functional movement, functional mobility, functional range conditioning, all these new modern scientifically validated certifications and programs that cost thousands and thousands of dollars, and a bunch of, white coats and smart minds. And it gets really heady when you start breaking down the articulation of the da-da-da through the sagittal and frontal and transverse planes. That's all valid and it's great. And these old yogi dudes been doing this for thousands of years and just kind of calling it yoga and movement. And it's just movement, and human bodies move in certain ways. They all move in 3 dimensions. We all have spines. We all have these things that work certain ways. And if we do certain things to those things, they work better and we can maintain the function of them for a longer period of time. And so I just have always seen that connection with one foot in the Eastern philosophy and the worlds of traditional Chinese medicine and Taoism and yoga and Buddhism and meditation and yoga, all this stuff, Qigong. And then I take all these like scientific, modern, innovative certifications and branches of science and stuff. And I'm like, wait, that's just this. That's just cat cow. Like that's just balancing half moon or whatever it is. It's just like, oh, that's just a shape. That's just a pose that I've seen in every yoga class of all time and people have been doing for thousands of years. It's just gotten a new name, a new label, and it's, and a price tag ultimately. But it comes back to just these low cost, no cost shapes and positions that the human body moves through. So what I did is take, and if you hear me preach about methods versus concepts, let's scoot back from a method and apply a concept that's universal to any method that we apply it to. Moving your spine through the sagittal plane by flexing it forward and extending it backwards is a concept that can be applied to yoga for cat-cow. It can be applied to strength training for crunches. It can be applied to regular activities of daily living, like bending over and picking up a pencil, reaching up behind you, stretching in a chair. They're shapes, they're concepts that can be applied to all methods. And so the more I've learned all of these different methodologies and stepped back and taken a bigger look at them, I'm like, okay, that's all this one same thing. And so with 3D maps, the main concept is the spine moves in 3 major directions. This is the first one that I just mentioned, which is the sagittal plane, flexion and extension. It rounds forward and it arches back. The second plane of movement is the frontal plane, which is this side bendy stuff from side to side, and like moving like a crab when you're moving sideways, strafing on a keyboard for any of you gamers out there. And then the third is the transverse plane, which is rotation, where we twist from side to side. Gesture of no with your head is transverse plane. Reaching back and taking that toy away from your kid in the back seat as they're trying to chew on it while you're driving. You're implementing these things all the time. These shapes are a part of our life all the time. And we live in these really limited, as humans in the modern world, we've taken away a lot of our movement options and we've limited ourselves into these little boxes. We move pretty much only in the sagittal plane. If we look at workouts, we've got curls, bench press, rows, pull-ups, overhead presses, squats, deadlifts, lunges. Everything is in the sagittal plane. We're moving forward and backwards, but how often do we move side to side like this? How often do we do rotational movements in the gym? And when you're looking at conventional weight training that you see at LA Fitness, like rarely ever. Probably the most frontal plane thing you've seen is dumbbell lateral raises. The most rotational thing, I don't even know. There's like not very many. So the point is, even in fitness spaces where you're supposed to be working on this stuff that makes you fit and keeps you healthy, we're not even seeing it there, let alone our normal life where we sleep in a box, we get up, we go heat something up in a box from the freezer that is a box that goes into a microwave box, and we heat that up, and then we watch a box of TV or our box on our phone while we eat, and then we go sit in our box and drive our motor box to work, where we then sit in a cubicle box and we work on a computer box, and then we're boxing ourselves in literally, mentally and physically, and then we're isolating ourselves, we're boxing ourselves in emotionally, whole nother conversation, to where we're limiting our capacity. And Wolf's Law is a great reference point for this conversation. Basically, anything that gets stressed physiologically, tissues in the body, for example, this being specifically referenced to bone, is then elicits an adaptive response to get stronger, to withstand the force of that stress for repeated bouts. Great example of this is when astronauts go to space, no more gravity. What happens to their bones? They actually start to break down. The osteoclasts start to go in, and the bones become less dense. They become more porous and softer because they're not needing to hold up the meat suit against gravity. If we didn't have the bones, we would just be freaking jelly amoebas rolling around on the floor, right? So the bones give us structure and stability to resist gravity so we can, function. But when we go to space, we don't need that anymore. So we become more amoeba-like because that stress is not present. And then when the astronauts re-enter the atmosphere and gravity is present again, what happens? Right away, the bones start reforming, and it's not like a massive breakdown where like they turn into jelly beans, right? Like we've all seen the videos, like you still maintain your form, but it's at this microcellular level, but it's happening. Long enough period of time, you could probably, again, 1% for 100 days, we start to see at scale larger changes via the compounding effect. But they come back into the gravitational field, and the bones are like, oh, there's gravity. Wolf's Law is saying that whatever gets stressed responds and adapts to that and becomes stronger against that force. And that's arguably the greatest strength of a human being, and why we've survived over thousands and thousands of years, is our ability to adapt to weather, adapt to environments of any kind. Like that is our strong suit, is we can adapt. And so that also goes in the opposite, right? Of like, if there's no gravity, if there's no stress, no response. And so you begin to atrophy, you begin to break down, you begin to lose that resilience, that capacity. And that it goes back to the old adage, if you don't use it, you lose it. That literally is true. And so if we don't use our body to its fullest capacity, if we don't move, if we don't load our tissues through full range of motion with control in all directions, then we lose the ability to do that. And then when we try to go do that, reach around and grab that thing from the kid, go over. That's why people go over to pick up a pencil or tie their shoe and they blow a disc out in their back. Well, you haven't gone into full range of motion flexion in your spine in how long? And like if the muscles are weak and atrophied, they can't support that load. And so then the joints have to take that force, and something happens, something slips, a bulge in a tire, flat tire. The weakest point of the tire is where the bulge happens and the force leaks out, and then the break happens, right? When you're bending a stick, it breaks at the point where there's the most force on that spot. And so if the tissue is weak around that area and you create a lot of stress in one specific angle or vector, yeah, of course, you're going to create the tissue's not going to be able to hold, and it's going to give, and something's going to pull, strain, stretch, break in a bad way, right? So that's how injury happens. And so That's the whole game of an ounce of prevention equals a pound of cure, is if we're constantly making sure that we're maintaining those shapes and positions and postures and ranges of motion by moving through them regularly and intentionally with control and progressively with more and more challenge to build resilience and capacity, are inversely the likelihood of getting injured, of force overcoming our capacity, goes down, and vice versa. If we don't do that, they get weaker, and then we try to go into that position. We don't have capacity or resilience to maintain that shape anymore, and something gives. And so that just really nails home how it's on you 100% to maintain the integrity and capacity and function of your tissues by constantly moving them. And so going back to 3D maps, it's a really beautiful practice that moves your body, your spine specifically, through all three ranges of motion. And it gets a lot of other joints involved at the same time, especially at the progressed end range level 7 of the stepping variation. Again, the only thing is it's a little progressed for some people, and it incorporates a lot of other joints and makes it more complex and difficult in that sense. And so looking at how we can make this more simple, anybody that is listening to this that's sitting down in a chair, you can do this with me right now. I want you to do this with me right now. Phase 1 is seated. We can move the spine through full range of motion. For the most part, we can move it through a large range of motion right here seated. I'm going to take you through exactly what you're going to do in this program, in this spinal mobility program. First one is flexion extension. You're just going to round forward as you let your arms reach past your knees, and you tuck your chin into your chest. Okay, you should feel a stretch on the back side of your body. That's all those tissues that are being loaded through flexion. Okay, and then we're going to lift our chest, pull our belly button in, slide our arms, our elbows, our shoulders back as we lift our sternum, our neck, and our chin. Now we're feeling a stretch on some of this stuff here. Okay, the tissues that are being loaded and lengthened through extension. Okay, that's the first movement. We just move through the sagittal plane via flexion and extension, flexion, rounding forward, extension, arching back. And we do that several times, 5, 10 times. And we've now encouraged, we've elicited a stimulus that is stressing in a very light degree the tissues on the front and the back side of our bodies, that's telling our body, hey, I want to use this stuff. It's like cleaning your house. It's like brushing your teeth. This is why I call this stuff movement hygiene, mobility hygiene, because just like a cavity happens when shit gets crusty and dusty and you don't do anything about it, and it starts to get gross and funky, and it starts to grow bacteria, and it starts to decay, right? It's because it's dirty back there. And so you have to go in and you have to brush that tooth. So just like you need to brush your teeth to avoid cavities, what is a cavity at the end of the day? It's a lot of inflammation, right? Or the body responds to a cavity with inflammation. I would say it'd probably be a better response. Heat and swelling and pain and irritation. And in the same fashion, what are your teeth made out of? The same stuff your bones are made out of, right? What are your gums made out of? The same stuff these tissues are made out of. So your bones and your gums are the same as your joints and your tissues. So if you need to brush your teeth, you need to floss your joints, right? So you don't get cavities in the other areas of your body. So you don't get inflammation in the other areas of your body. And so just like we brush our teeth, we floss our joints. And so this is how we floss the front and the back side of our joints. And mainly specifically here in phase 1, seated variation, we're just talking about the joints of our spine, of our torso, our trunk, our neck, head, that kind of stuff. Now we go to the second one. What's that? Side bend. Arms down at the sides. We let our right arm tip down. Imagine you're trying to pick up a pencil between your car seat and the middle console, or you drop a pencil at your work desk and you're reaching down to pick it up. Literally, that's just an intention, a motor action through the frontal plane. You know, it's just a side bend. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Now we're loading and lengthening the tissues on the side of the body. We're brushing and flossing all the stuff here. Now we've gotten this stuff and this stuff. What about the other stuff? Some of the internal stuff and the rotational stuff. So now we're just twisting and looking over our shoulder. Okay, I like to use one arm on the inside of the thigh to create a little bit more pressure, to elicit a little bit more rotation and a little bit more stress, a little bit more load on the tissues. That's going to help you get into a greater range of motion and get a little bit more of a signal, a little bit more information, a little bit more stress into the system so you can respond to it. You can elicit more of an adaptive response to it. You can maintain more resilience and capacity in those positions, in that range of motion. Okay, that's it. We just did 3D maps, phase 1 from the seated variation. Now, that's Gary Gray's breakdown of the 3 planes. Now that you see the idea of how we took the concept of moving through 3 planes and we just changed the original base position that we're in. So his regular method of the full step, which you'll see in the 3D Maps program, is standing and stepping and the arms and all this stuff is involved. We can take that and break it down into smaller pieces and make it more basic. The very most basic version is what we just did. We're sitting right here and we're just going through these 3 planes like so. The next variation is quadruped. So we go from seated to all fours. And then we go to half kneeling, to full kneeling, to standing, to split stance, to then stepping. So all I did was take his full variation of 3 movements from the stepping, and I just broke it down into several other phases that are practically applicable to different situations in life. AKA, I can't get up right now on an airplane and do the full 3D maps in the middle aisle unless you're a savage like me and you do that kind of stuff and you don't give a fuck what people think. I'm that guy in the airport that's like stretching and doing yoga waiting for my flight. Or going to the back of the plane and like stretching in the little bathroom space. I'm like, oh, I'm just waiting for the bathroom. Psych, I'm actually doing my 3D maps, tell me. So that is how we can take something that is only applicable in certain situations and make it more universal and apply it in other areas. So it becomes now more practical and sustainable because there's a wider field of application. Also, in that same sense of a wider field of application, we've taken the intensity or the complexity of the stepping variation that might not be great for somebody that's 90 and hasn't moved in a really long time and gotten off the couch, or somebody that just got out of surgery and can't go into a full stepping range of motion, or maybe you have like an ankle injury, you can't step at all. Well, if your ankle's injured, then you can do the seated one or the quadruped one where you're not putting any pressure on the foot, but you're still moving the tissues through full range of motion in at least the spine, which is better than not moving any tissues at all, right? We want to maintain as much capacity for as many joints as we can. And we want to brush as many teeth, floss as many joints as we can, as often as we can, so we can maintain optimal health and function of those tissues. So we've now created something that is much more universally applicable to all people and to all environments. We can do it from seated. We can do it on the floor. You'll notice, again, if you go to yoga and you're like, oh, flexion extension from all fours, that's just cat-cow. Oh, well, the frontal plane of side bending from all fours is like a child's pose with a lateral reach when they have you walk your hands over to the side and you get a big stretch over here. Oh, well, rotation through the transverse plane from all fours is a thread the needle. If you are a yogi or if you've done a yoga class, you know what all 3 of those poses are. You've done 3D maps before in a yoga class and not even known it, right? So that's the beauty of this, is like, oh, so it is applicable to all these other methods when we think about it more conceptually, more universally. And the idea that I created was something that's a little bit more sequential, where you can start with phase 1, seated, and you do it for a week. Do it every single day for a week. Then you move to phase 2, which is all fours. It's a little bit more complex. You're using a few more joints. There's a little bit more stress because now you're stabilizing your weight in your core and in your arms. So it's a micro degree harder and micro degree greater range of motion. Or I should say micro degree more joints involved. Then we go to half kneeling. Now we're balancing. Now we have to use the core muscles to balance because we're not as stable. We're in a more challenging base position. Full kneeling, now even more unstable. We don't have the kickstand of the other leg. Standing, now we're using more joints and going through a way greater range of motion because now the hips are getting a lot more involved through full flexion and extension. Split stance, oh boy, now we're really challenging balance. Now instead of staying stable here, we're here, narrowing our base of support and putting a lot more stretch through the hip flexor tissues of the trail leg and so on. And then stepping is like, now we're adding locomotion, which is very complex, and that's the full version of the 3D maps. So what we're doing here is we're just giving you a sequence that you can progressively adapt to and build competence in over time. And it makes it a lot easier than, once you know all 7, to apply this universally in any environment at any time, which is going to help you do the thing, right? Like, Michael make fun of me in this moment. I have a toothbrush and toothpaste in my car. Why? Because if I'm just for whatever reason late, or I'm out and I'm in between and I had a God matcha and I need to brush my teeth, I can do it in the car. Efficiency 101. So same thing here of like, well, I can't do my stepping variation on the plane, but I can do my seated variation. So I can still touch these corners. I can still provide information, a stimulus into the system that keeps maintaining my tissue quality, keeps my teeth clean, keeps flossing and brushing my joints, even though I'm not able to do the full thing as it was originally prescribed. So that's the beauty of what I've done with the 3D maps, is made it more universally applicable as step 1. The second thing I did with 3D maps is I added a 4th movement. There's a methodology called functional range systems, and within that, we do something called CARs, controlled articular rotations. There's no need to go into this on this call, but they're slow motion joint circles that integrate all 3 planes of motion at the same time. So flexion, extension, lateral flexion, and rotation. If we put all those together, what do we got? Flexion, rotation, lateral flexion, extension, rotation, lateral flexion, flexion, rotation. What does that start to look like when we smooth it out and make it less linear and robotic? That's just a circle, right? It's circumduction as the fancy word for it, but it's just a slow motion circle. That is what's actually integrating all 3 of the separate isolated planes into one, more complete movement that's more realistic to real life, because oftentimes we're not just moving through one plane. Like when we drop a pencil on the ground, we're not just side bending to pick it up, right? There's probably a little bit of forward rounding as well, or maybe a little bit of rotation. Like think about clicking your seatbelt. You're going multiplanar. You're rotating and flexing down at the same time. And when we move the body in real life, it's not just like in this robotic fashion. It's usually some kind of combination of those 3 planes together, which makes more spirally movements rather than these linear robotic movements, more fluid movements. And so we want to make sure to train that too, right? We want to go through each one independently. This is the way that I like to describe this, is when you look at a team sport warming up for a game, you have, let's use football as an example. You have all the quarterbacks warm up their arms. They start throwing the ball back and forth. All the receivers start catching passes. They start doing their position-specific job in the warm-up. All the linemen, they start getting down in the squat position and kind of pushing each other and warming up all those muscles and those skills and patterns that they're going to use for that. The kickers, they start kicking field goals, right? Then after all the individual positions have warmed up for their position specifically, they come together as a team and do some scrimmage plays together where everybody functions together. That's the idea here, is we isolate independently and then we integrate interdependently. We bring everybody together and have them practice together. So we bring all 3 planes together and have them practice together. So for each of the 7 different phases, I've added a slow motion joint circle variation for each of the phases. So now you're integrating the linear movements in an isolated fashion all together in a more liquid, dynamic, practically applicable, athletic movement that's touching on some of the corners that you just don't get when you're moving in straight lines. So that's what I've done with the 3D Maps program. And I have been doing this program every day, for the most part, every day, plus 80% of my life since 2015 when I learned it, which is over 11 years. And I obviously am very passionate about it and love it. And that's because it works. Efficiency gets me stoked. I love efficiency. So the prescription for this to start off is just doing 5 reps in all 3 planes and then 5 joint circles in each direction after you do that. And The protocol, the programming of this is do phase 1, the seated variation, every day. Take you 5 minutes max, right, to do 5 reps this way, this way, this way, and then 5 joint circles each way, less than 5 minutes. Do that once a day at least, every day for 7 days. Once you've done 7 days worth from the seated variation, then move on to phase 2 and do 7 days from quadruped, and then move on and do 7 days from half kneeling, and then full kneeling, and then standing and split stance. So by the time you get to the stepping variation, you've already been doing 6 weeks worth of 3D maps. You've built great capacity, great stability, coordination, motor control. So by the time you get to that more progressed and complex variation, you're ready for it. You already know what to expect. Your body already knows the feelings and shapes that it's going to be getting into for the most part, other than just some nuances to the variation, because it's already been practicing it for the last 6 weeks. So it's much more practical and sustainable to apply in this fashion. And then after you've gone through all 7 weeks, all 7 phases, from there, then you can apply any of the phases, any of the variations at any point in time. I do all of these still. Seated, I do it in the morning when I'm doing meditation, first light, make like Sphinx. You guys see the God Machas in the sunrise. I'm doing my 3D maps out there with my spine from the seated variation. Quadruped, every yoga class. I'm doing that in every yoga class when I'm warming up. Half kneeling, full kneeling, both variations that I like to do when I'm doing ground warm-ups. Standing, split stance, and stepping, amazing variations to do during my standing warm-ups. I did split stance today before this call as my variation for a warm-up before my workout. So I use it all the time. I use all 7 variations all the time, and having all 7 variations, all 7 different tools, allows you to apply them at any time, at any place, specific to what your needs are and the environmental conditions are in that moment. So it's really amazing. You guys are going to love it a lot. And so you're like, okay, where's more information on how I can do this? This is within the free KFP community already. What? It's already in there? Yes. I wrote a PDF ebook for you, and it's included in the community programs section. So all you have to do is go to the spaces section, go to community programs, open up the community programs, view the lessons, and you'll go to the second course right underneath the JERF nutrition program, 3D Maps Spinal Mobility Program. You open up the first lesson, it's program overview. It's going to be me giving you a summarized version of this webinar, and then it'll have the PDF ebook for you to download in that lesson. So you can just download that ebook and have it on hand, ready to go. And then each of the lessons following that first lesson of program overview, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, each one has each of the movements in there with an exercise video demo and text description instructions for you to use to get all the little details for each one down. If you're somebody that likes to really nail the details and get all the little nuances of it down, you have a video of me doing every single one and has text descriptions for each one in each lesson. And then you can just check them off as you go through, and it'll mark your progress of how far you've gotten. And you can go week by week through that. All of those videos, all those descriptions, all the explanation of the program design and how to implement it week by week is in that PDF as well. So just download that and you can refer back to it anytime. Pop it up on your phone, click on the video, it'll take you there as well. Or you can access it in the community programs section in the free KFP community. Download complete. Let's see, did I miss anything? I think that's everything. In closing, thank you guys for listening, whoever showed up, and start implementing the phase 1. And you can just come into the community chat and say, hey, phase 1, do a little check mark. Do that for 7 days. Phase 2, check mark. Keep us posted on any questions you have as they come up and what you're noticing as you go. Typically about 2 to 3 weeks in of implementing this program, you'll start to notice some significant changes in your posture, in your spinal health, the reduction of back pain and neck pain, more ease of movement. You should start to notice all those things within 2 to 3 weeks, maybe sooner, But typically it takes 2 to 3 weeks for everything to start kicking in if you're doing it 5 minutes a day, every day. But you're welcome to do it more. Obviously, this stuff is great. You can do it at any time. It's really good to do first thing in the morning when you're waking up your body. It's great to do before any kind of physical activity to warm up and prepare the tissues for higher levels of intensity. And it's also great to downregulate your nervous system as a practice following your workout or before bed and preparing for bed. You can go nice and slow and do some of the seated ones and pause and stretch into them a little bit more and allow your nervous system to relax before you go to sleep to help encourage going to sleep faster and having a better night of sleep. And also, of course, improving the tissue quality at the same time. People brush their teeth before they go to bed. Why not floss your joints at the same time? So that is our presentation on the 3D maps.